morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the first session of this busy day. I am glad to see you here. My name is Barbora Krempaská, and I'm the project manager of Friedrich Foundation for Freedom, Central Europe, based in Prague. I am the moderator of this session, and yeah, we have very important topic, the pressure on civil society in our region. History shows us that civil society has been one of the driving forces behind democratic transformation across our region. But in recent years, it has also become one of the main targets, facing shrinking space, restrictive laws, disinformation, and loss of public trust. Today, we look at three dimensions. First, the nature of the pressure. Second, the narratives used to justify it. And finally, how NGOs and citizens resist to rebuild resilience. I am thrilled to discuss this topic with our distinguished guests, renowned civic activists. Please welcome Nino Kalandadze, the founder of the Chavchavadze Center, Georgia's first civil society organization modeled after European political foundations, and also former MP and Deputy Foreign Minister of Georgia. Welcome and thank you very much for coming. Next is Márton Schlanger from Hungary. He's working as a lead researcher for the Budapest-based liberal think Republikon Institute. We have from Slovakia, Andrej Schulz. He's deputy director of the Martina Filko Institute, a liberal think tank linked to the Progressive Slovakia Party and advisor to the deputy speaker of Slovak's parliament. And last but not least, Poland-based and I believe well-known Jakub Kocjan, president of the board Akcja, Demokracja Foundation, where he was leading campaigns and protests in defense of judicial independence in Poland and for solidarity with Ukraine. So let me stick with you, Jakub, for a while because we are here in Poland. And let's start with the domestic situation. In Poland, it feels like yesterday we just come out of 8 years under PiS governments, which often also portrayed NGOs as enemies. I think it may be not that convenient to go back to these times in your head, but could you please briefly explain how that period affect your work? What does it mean or meant for you and civil society in Poland? And maybe also what challenges still remain with the new government?
Good morning. Hello, everyone. Firstly, really big thanks both for Liberty and for Naumann Foundation for having us here, and it's good to be here again at Freedom Games and share experiences on international level in our region, which is what our enemies are doing all the time. So good to work on that. Yes. Probably currently we are in surprising situation when Poland is the only of these countries here which is in democratic camp. Unfortunately, we are expecting that it can be an episode in our history, so it's still a good occasion to discuss what happened in last 8 years and also what have not happened during last 2 years in order to preserve the gains of democracy and civil society. Just briefly for our international guests also, the far-right government was in power between 2015 and 2023, and after surprisingly winning both presidential and general elections in 2015 by marginal majorities, they were able to form their own government without the external support, this coalition. In Polish system, the role of president is quite important, so having at the same time the control of both branches of executive and legislative branches totally, also gave them the opportunity to dismantle the rule of law system in Poland. Firstly, the Constitutional Tribunal was attacked in first year after their victory, so of course also the mobilization of civil society was quite significant, but not enough to stop these changes. And in 2017, they attacked the rest of judiciary system, both the Supreme Court and the common courts, together with the whole system of nomination of judges, so they can guarantee their control over that also. It was the time of one of the biggest mobilization of the civil society in Poland, 2017, when also my organization, Akcja, Demokracja, participated in organization of the protests in more than 200 cities and towns in Poland at the same time. And we were able to stop the whole reform of the judiciary system for half a year and overtaking of the Supreme Court for more than 3 years. And generally the whole reform was not as harsh as it was planned by them, because of achieving some internal tensions between president and the governing party. And it was the time when the campaign against NGOs and civil society started. I will talk later about particular narratives which were used during this attack, but I want only to say that both these protests and the fact that in 2023, according to the reports of Battery Foundation, the turnout has increased in Poland more than 8 percentage points just because of get out the vote campaigns of civil society. Because of these two factors, we NGOs are quite officially now designed as the first public enemy if only far right is going back to power. So it's like the reality and general background here, and I will be happy to share more about particular attacks and our resistance later.
Yeah, and do you feel that it changed now with the new government? Like, is the move better?
Yeah, definitely the attacks, especially the propaganda of then overtaken public television, which targeted NGOs. It's important change for us. Yeah, like the name of my organization was always pronounced in German language and in German pronunciation during far-right government. So instead of Akcja, Demokracja, Akcjon, Demokracja, just to try to associate us with Germany and together with their anti-German obsession even more. So lack of this propaganda and obstacles are useful, but also we have to admit that the Democrats are not good in long-term and strategic planning and in supporting their own people, and it's of course the problem, especially in current both international and financial situation of NGOs and civil society all over Europe, and especially in our region.
Yeah, we will come to this maybe a bit later, but it's amazing to observe this change here in Poland. I mean, the rest in the region would be very grateful for this democratic wave. But it's not the same, unfortunately. In many of our countries, the opposite is true. And exactly that's why we are here today. So, Nino, I will now turn to you. Georgia has been in the international spotlight because of the controversial foreign agent law. Brave Georgian people are protesting in the streets over a year now. How has this law and the broader political climate changed the way civil society operates? Can you please briefly introduce us to the current situation in Georgia? I know it's a tough question.
Yes, it is indeed. Thanks for having me. I'm very grateful to be here. It's my first time to be participating in Freedom Games, and I very much appreciate particular your attention and focus on Georgia. The situation in Georgia is indeed very dire. Just to state some self-explanatory facts, As of today, we have over 150 political prisoners. The number is increasing every night. This number includes almost at least one political figure from every opposition party. It includes activists, it includes prominent figures, writers, publishers, actors, but also just young civil activists who are trying to protect Georgia's young democracy. Several media outlets have been already shut down because of the repressive laws. Remaining two are struggling to survive. NGOs have become largely dysfunctional because of the newly reinforced FARA and the heavy fines imposed on civil society organizations. The political opposition is on the verge to become outlawed and banned by the Constitutional Court. The three largest independent universities that still preserve certain academic freedom, they have become under fire and their management is being prosecuted. The German ambassador was earlier this week recalled from Berlin for consultations, who has been systematically attacked by the regime and labeled as Nazi by a prominent pro-government media outlet. The police have begun arresting activists simply for wearing masks. As for our organization, we have been under pressure, under regime's pressure for many years now. It did not start with FARA because of who we are and what we do. We analyze state capture, they capture the state. We counter disinformation to promote civic memory. They are trying to erase civic memory. We are trying to promote democracy within political parties. They ban political parties. So pretty much everything, and when we, including myself as a former official, we represent, and my portfolio covered particularly EU aspiration and Euro-Atlantic aspirations and integration of Georgia. So I very much represent everything they fight effectively. We also do youth camps, and funnily, youth camps have been identified by the state services as a national threat, as a threat to national security. But when it comes to repressive laws and what the regime is currently conducting goes beyond just attacking civil society organizations. It is what we can call a final stage of the Russian-style autocratic consolidation. And it's not about the civil society per se, it's about controlling or establishing control over every institution and every aspect of the society that is instrumental to change democratically. What they are, well, I was lucky to have graduated from a German high school where I came as an exchange student. And unlike Soviet schools, they would teach us politics. And I was taught that democracy means that one party wins elections, and then another party wins elections. But if the elections are won always by the same party, then it's no longer democracy. And this is what the modern political scientists call electoral autocracy. And this is what is being established or is attempted to get established across affected Central European countries, including Georgia, where elections are held formally, but you can never challenge the power of the ruling party, and you can never change the status quo. And that seems to be the ultimate goal right now. So what they are doing, or our domestic oligarchy is doing now, is they have seized or they have captured all key state institutions already over the past 13 years. And they are now trying to take over the remaining independent institutions from the state. Mainly, these are the civil society organizations who still manage to function independently. Political parties who are believed to be pro-Western political parties and are trying to maintain their democratic power. These are universities, as I said, several universities that manage to maintain their academic freedom. And this is the street protests, which seems to be very painful for the regime. The civil society organizations, again, have become largely dysfunctional because we can no longer operate safely on the ground. We need to keep in mind that we also need to protect our actual beneficiaries who are no longer safe because they, according to new repressive laws, they can also request personal information of all our beneficiaries, of all our contractors. And if we refuse to obey, then they can impose not just financial fines, but also criminal charges against the civil society organizations. So many Georgians have repeatedly questioned, but also international partners have repeatedly questioned if Georgia can become another Belarus, since it's so different culturally and economically and socially. And my answer has always been, yes, it can and it will. Not because the domestic context is similar, but because we share the same enemy, we share the same screenplay and the same playbook that is being so diligently implemented by our domestic oligarchs and domestic dictators. Yeah. Obviously, there is reason to hope because the society has proven extremely resilient. The international community seems to have a common understanding in the meantime with regard to Russia, but also to the Black Sea region and its importance to European security. And because we all hope that Ukraine prevails in this war, and then this big fight for freedom will also affect Georgian citizens as well.
Thank you for ending on this positive note, even if it's very alarming what's happening there. And thank you for sharing this. And I believe that Márton and Andrej can relate to many of these things because, as you said, unfortunately, a lot of authoritarian regimes and leaders in our region have copied this. And I think it sounds familiar for our Hungarian friend Márton because actually Hungary was the first one applying this foreign agent rule in Hungary. So Márton, could you a little bit introduce us in the situation in Hungary, how civil society operates? Is there any civil society still in Hungary?
Yes, thank you. Of course, hopefully there is still civil society. I don't know if I count as civil society, but even if I don't, I assure you there are some remnants still. You know, you're screwed when you have so much harassment going towards civil society that you have to make a list, and I did. But we don't have an hour for me to tell you, so I just speak about the last 10 years. We have a proud heritage of harassing civil society, unfortunately, in Hungary. And I would go back to, well, first to 2014 would be the year which saw maybe the first spike in attacks against civil society, which was when special police showed up at the doors of the Norwegian fund in Hungary, confiscating drives and paperwork and stuff like that, which was kind of a first of its kind police action, or I should say ruling action against the Norwegian fund without basis. Of course, they didn't find anything. There was no charge. There was no explanation. And this was now 11 years ago, so we've done much more than that since. I would point out maybe as a next point, Lex CEU, or the civil law of 2027. If you don't know, CEU was, or Central European University, was a university founded way back when by George Soros in Hungary and in the US. And it was the only university in Hungary that that gave you sort of a double diploma, one Hungarian and one American. So they made a law that if you have a campus in the US and if you have double diploma in a foreign country and in Hungary, you were not allowed to give two diplomas, just one, which was a law that only applied at the time to Central European University. This is why we call that law Lex CEU. About motivations, it's unclear, but if you work in politics, there are many kind of strongly based rumors that get to you, and one of the possible explanations for Lex CEU was that our government and the economical elite tied to our government likes buildings, beautiful buildings, well-situated buildings, and Central European University had a building block right across from the Hungarian parliament where many governmental buildings or where many governmental offices are. And this is a beautiful, freshly renovated building complex, and one of the rumors was that the reason behind Lex CEU to drive CEU out of Hungary, which, by the way, they succeeded in, as you may have known. CEU now resides in Vienna. So one of the motivations may have been getting those buildings, which they didn't get. Now many civil organizations actually rent or live or actually work from CEU buildings, either very cheap or rent free. So they didn't succeed on that part specifically. I would tell you about the narratives around Lex CEU and this civil law, but I think that's for a later point, so I will not do that. But at the same time, or maybe 1 year later, was the new civil law or the foreign agent law. This was kind of at the same time as CEU. This is what Barbora mentioned. This was when you had to say, or if you ever received funding from outside of Hungary as a civil organization, you had to deem yourself as a foreign funded agent or an agent of a foreign organization. And this was the first of its kind, I think, in the region, but actually was outruled in 2021 by the European judiciary. But that didn't stop our government, because when this legislation was outlawed in 2021, we have started to receive, or many civil organizations who were beneficiaries of foreign funding have started to receive checks similar to that of the Norwegian fund just 5 years before or 8 years before, confiscating things, just, constant police presence. Because they couldn't carry out the law, they chose to use the police in a different way. And as you know, or as you may not know, Hungarian civil society is very dependent on funding from the state. And in 2019, they changed the law of funding civil society in Hungary, and they moved civil society funding to the Ministry of the Prime Minister under a state-owned company, which was basically the point where, and this is where we are now, actually we are even worse now, I will say in a second, but this is where, at the point where we are now, where you cannot get funding or can barely get any funding from the state, especially if you are in legal aid, if you help minorities, if you have a democratic institute, you cannot get funding from the state. But generally speaking, the only state funding is given to civil organizations run by state officials, friends of state officials, civil organizations that are used directly in party campaigning by Viktor Orbán's party, Fidesz and KDNP. So civil organization was kind of overrun by the government, and this is actually the leading policy of the government, that they have to have their own version of everything. They have to have their own version of academia, they have to have their own version of civil society, they have to have their own version of public media or media. And so now, if you have, exactly, and now if you have, if you are a civil organization, you only get funding if you are basically spewing propaganda. And almost finally, I promise you, the list will end very shortly. We had two laws called sovereignty law, or actually two versions of sovereignty law, first in 2023 and then in 2025. And basically right now, it is forbidden to get foreign funding as a civil organization if you work in democracy and humanitarian aid. It's hard to say when exactly, because basically the law states you cannot get foreign funding as a civil organization if this certain institute, led by one of the main propagandists of the government, says so. So it's not like if you are funded by this, if you are legally meeting this or that criteria, you cannot get funding from outside of Hungary if we say so. If you do accept funding, money equal to like 3 times of that amount is subtracted from your account immediately. So this is the situation right now, but actually the enforcing of this law, the second half. So the first half, this institute that deems you basically enemy of the state is already founded and running. Actually, I'm proud to say that my organization is a state enemy, so watch out. But the second part, actually taking away the money, was supposed to be passed this spring, but was suddenly moved to a later date. I would assume this is not because of our protests, because those never seem to work, but I think it was maybe, as my boss would say, there are interests that can even make Viktor Orbán's hands shake, and he thinks that some specific interests made it so that this law was not realized just yet. And the final thing I want to say regarding civil society is 2025. First of all, Trump came to power and US aid was dismantled. And the government said that there was a question of sovereignty and freedom. The biggest scandal Hungary has seen, that turns out that US aid was funding civil organizations in Hungary, which was said, and I leave the narrative talks for a later round, but George Soros's network and the fake civils and NGOs from Brussels were funded by the US, by the Biden administration, and they say that this was a huge scandal and that civil society was busted, and this is what they were saying all along. So we have now a special person with almost ministerial powers in the US researching this scandal, how much money was received, but actually most money was, for example, received by a Catholic university in Hungary. So US aid was, as you know, of course, US aid is not a big problem in Hungary. We lost it in many civil organizations. Over 600 people were affected, but it's not as like losing the daily meals of 17 million in Sudan or something, but it was still a big problem. And finally, the 2025 was, second part was forbidding Pride from being organized, which was still organized, and it was the biggest Pride march ever in Hungary. So that was, even in Fidesz circles, is deemed as one of the missteps of Viktor Orbán, because it just made Pride more popular. And I think I stop for now there.
Great, and again, ending on a positive note, I really like it, even though I thought this will be very depressing panel. But coming to Slovakia, Orbán's close ally, Slovak Prime Minister Fico, is slowly catching up on other countries, unfortunately. We are really observing an unprecedented hostility towards NGOs and journalists in Slovakia. So, Andrej, could you please share with us how does it look like now and how it is affecting your work and the civil society?
Thank you. Yes, you mentioned Fico. He calls himself a socialist, but he really isn't. His party calls itself Social Democratic, but just this two weeks ago, I think, they were kicked out of the Party of European Socialists unanimously because every major far-right narrative and policy that you can think of the past few years, they have embraced on Ukraine and Russia, on Europe, on migration, on queer people, or even on vaccination. So they would. The European allies have told him that they would have none of it. They don't take it. I think. And then to admit, governing the country for macroeconomic and geopolitical reasons right now is pretty tough. And the audience might be interested in knowing that increasingly people are comparing themselves to Poland, and they're asking the government, they see Poland as this place of economic growth, of sprawl of highways, which is considered very symbolic, and they also notice the prices that they often are lower when they go shopping in Poland. So the government is being challenged even by its own voters, and who are asking, why can't you do such a job as the governments in Poland have been seem to have been able to do? And so the government is trying to respond to this by trying to change the agenda, by trying to shift the narrative from these bread and butter issues to questions of war and peace and what they call sovereignty, and to ideological, in particular gender issues. And in both of these, this idea that NGOs are part of some kind of global conspiracy, that there's some kind of alliance between NGOs and elites and foreign embassies and the European Union and George Soros, of course, who are trying to undermine Slovakia or trying to shift public opinion, is coming in very handy. NGOs. In Slovakia, there's a history of strong civil society in 1989, also more recently in 2018, after the murder of journalist Jan Kuciak, there were big demonstrations which even forced the current prime minister out of power back then. So they definitely remember that. Both sides remember that. And there have been protests, which you may have heard of, against the criminal justice reform by the current government, against the nationalization of culture institutions, and so on. The government's response has been delegitimization. We'll talk about that in a minute. It has also been cutting funding. Both the Culture Ministry and the Justice Ministry, responsible for human rights, have cut significantly, almost to zero, funding to NGOs and the kinds of causes that they despise. There has been scandalization, there have been many audits against NGOs, there's even a criminal investigation going on against supposed interference of the British government, in our case it's Britain, not Germany, in the election process because of a Get Out the Vote campaign 2 years ago. And yes, there is an NGO law. Because of the response of civil society, resistance of civil society, it is not as harsh as in Hungary, not to mention Georgia. So the foreign agent a bit got dropped from it. But NGOs will be required to publicize, or most NGOs will be required to publicize their donors. They will be, even more importantly, maybe subject to public information requests, just like government agencies, which can be a big source of harassment, and they will be facing penalties, of course, if they don't comply with it.
Thank you very much. So now I would like to talk about these narratives. What we have in common is that the leaders, authoritarian leaders in our countries, are perceiving NGOs or portraying them as enemy serving for foreign interests, not for the domestic interests. But now I would be interested, and our audience as well, what are the other narratives or reasons why NGOs are so oppressed? And be mindful of the time, please, so we have the chance to talk about other things as well. But I would start maybe with Márton, because when and where did it all begin with George Soros being behind everything?
It's hard to say when George Soros started scheming, so the exact date is unknown. No, I'm joking, but I would say it was 2000. When was it? 2016, maybe. We had a Stop Soros campaign in Hungary. This was at the time of CEE, as the university was founded by him. Basically, this was the few years. Actually, I forgot all about this in 10 years, but because it's been so long ago, but the word civil was used as a swear word by the government. Just basically civil organization, NGO, all of these words were actually used as a swear word, like saying liberal or like saying migrant. And actually the narrative was that George Soros, obviously because they wanted their university gone, but George Soros, through his agents in Hungary, civil society, is trying to dismantle the border fence and move all the immigrants, all the migrants to Hungary and to have a mixed society. So this was the first narrative. And it's very interesting to see that every country here has a sort of a foreign agent narrative, which kind of, it feels like that if everyone is working for foreign interests everywhere, I guess that, and the same is said about Viktor Orban, unfortunately not enough, but they did fund through the friend of a national, the bank of a friend, they funded the Le Pen campaign, for which Le Pen was prosecuted. They funded Serbia, they bought football teams. So essentially, if there's, in every country, there's foreign interests from another country, that means that all countries' interests are being considered, just not at home. So there's hope for the future. But the narratives are always very interesting in Hungary. The current one is Ukraine and Brussels. So currently, as you may have heard, for the first time in 16 years, we have a single party contesting the power of Fidesz in the polls. This party is called TISA party. The leader of the party, Péter Magyar, or Péter Hungarian. It's a bit funny that that's the name. It's kind of like a tale or something, but we have him now and we have the TISA party, so now the narrative is that Brussels, the city, well actually Brussels is more like an analogy for Western Europe as a whole. EU in Hungary is always mentioned as something external, as if we're not EU. So Brussels is using Péter Magyar as a puppet to, Ukraine and Zelensky and Brussels together use Péter Magyar as a puppet to bring our children to war. So this is the current narrative, but this is not strictly civil society per se. I'm actually happy to announce that civil society as a topic is not very prominent right now in Hungary. So we are more talking about Brussels and stuff, and George Soros is barely ever mentioned. Of course, I could go on and on, but I think it's better to leave more time for the rest of the guys. So let's just leave it at that.
Thank you. And I think very similar narratives are going on in Slovakia, right, Andrej?
Yes, absolutely. What I would add in terms of civil society more specifically, there was an attempt to divide civil society, not in the sense that Márton mentioned, but to try to turn the various subsections of civil society against each other. In particular, this idea that there are good and bad NGOs. The good NGOs are the ones who deal with honorable causes, such as caring for the elderly or for the sick, or maybe for lost puppies, and cultural heritage and sports. The bad NGOs are what they call political NGOs, who deal with human rights, who criticize the government, who defend vulnerable populations, or who deal with the environment. The good NGOs are the fully volunteer NGOs. The bad NGOs are the ones who have professional staff. The good NGOs live from maybe donations and maybe small funding from various levels of government. Bad NGOs receive grants from abroad, the EU or embassies or mysterious foreign donors. The good NGOs are promised that their funding will not be kept if they don't necessarily have to echo government narratives, but they should stay what is called apolitical. They should stay away from party politics. If they associate themselves with people who run for office, that's considered dangerous and undesirable, and that puts you at the risk of getting your funding cut, getting maybe audits from the government, getting delegitimized in government's press conferences or in this coterie of what some people called alternative media, pro-governmental YouTube channels and Facebook sites. But fortunately, civil society has been able to resist, and what so far, in my opinion, has been the single biggest issue of resistance of civil society and opposition to changes to the tax assignation law was spearheaded by the League Against Cancer, whose credit has not been reduced because of that, fortunately.
Yeah. So Nino, how is it in Georgia? Is it similar or totally different? Can you explain us briefly, maybe 2-3 minutes?
Yes, yes, the narratives are very similar and they are shared across the contemporary dictators. And I mentioned the same playbook for a reason, because I really believe they are coming from the same authors and are just being distributed among our domestic dictators. And yes, the NGO, we as civil society organizations, representatives of them, have been labeled as liberal fascists and enemies of the nation and servants of foreign service, etc. But there are also justifications such as we are defending our sovereignty and we won't let the West interfere into our domestic affairs, and we won't let us dictate how we should preserve our family values and conservative values. Some of the anti-Western cliches, particularly those serving long-term revisionist goals, were already used by the Soviet propaganda, and they are pretty same today. Like, we want peace, they want war. The West wants to drag us into war, like the imperialists wanted the war, and Soviet Union was preserving the small countries from being conquered by the evil West. Look at what happens in Ukraine. The entire region around us is drawn into the war, and we are the only ones preserving peace. And this obviously, and they are very, very case-sensitively selected, obviously, because in case of Georgia, the war memory is very much a part of our neurological system, obviously, because we still feel the consequences from the wars of the 90s and then the recent war from 2008. But at times, they also unintentionally reveal their true intentions. For example, prior to 2024 parliamentary elections, when our domestic oligarch traveled across Georgia to campaign for his party, he said, we can't risk another colorful revolution initiated by the Western-funded NGOs, and we can't risk losing power just because of a small, harmless wrongdoing, which then can result into a public upheaval because of the small, well-funded NGOs want to do so, dictated by the West. And we can't risk losing this because we are the ones preserving peace. So this pretty much brings it to the point what they are actually after.
Yeah, I am afraid it's very similar everywhere. And Jakub, can you briefly sum up how it was under the peacetime? And maybe more importantly, did the narrative change with the new government? Do you see any positive trends, especially the trust towards civil society in the common society?
Yeah, I think that the government has used three main strategies and narratives during this 8 years of far-right government. So, firstly, they just tried to ignore us for first 2 years. So, tried to pretend we are not existing, that there are just no demonstrations. They had control over the infosphere, so it was possible to some extent. In 2017, it was not possible anymore because of this biggest, as for that time, demonstrations, chains of light, so the demonstrations in defense of the Supreme Court. So they started with conspiracy theories. In our case, for example, they were trying to find some new term and accuse us of using that. So, for example, they presented, because they were shocked of the scale of demonstrations in the third year of the EU government, they used the term astroturfing and presented the protest in defense of judiciary system as Akcja, Demokracja used successfully some strange idea, astroturfing. By the way, they are scientific academic proofs that they used astroturfing in order to promote the narrative that we have used astroturfing during judiciary protests, which was quite interesting. Of course, conspiracy theories change it. Like I said with this German pronunciation of our name, in public TV only because one of our former employees has worked in his working history for some German company. Of course, with the change of technology, is much different now. Currently, there are, for example, AI-generated videos with conspiracy theories comparing my face to the face of young Soros, Alexander Soros, and our glasses, and they are quite similar, and maybe there is some private strange connection between that. So of course they are adjusting, and unfortunately they are adjusting to new technologies in much better pace than us, Democrats. Later, when generally these conspiracy theories were quite successful, but also not to this level. They also started to send spies to NGOs. The campaign against homophobia in Poland was attacked that way, that just they found that some of their volunteers were using glasses with cameras inside, trying to scan the documents in order, of course, to find any photo or documents which could be used to compare gay and queer people to pedophiles, and to go with this narrative which was used in 2019 and 2020. And also they started to target personally the leaders of the resistance. For example, during the women's strike, they banned abortion through captured constitutional tribunal during the biggest wave of COVID pandemic in 2020. And of course they did it in order to prevent from massive protests, but still there were around 4 million people protesting on the streets, so it was difficult to hide. So they started with the narrative that it is spread of death because of protesting and gathering during COVID. And I personally know people who got the first information that they were tested positively during the hospital test on COVID from public television, because all medical data was used, and private life of judges, independent prosecutors, but also activists by them. Their hope was to use this chilling effect against particular activists. Like they were quite successful in journalism with that, and also with buying enough of journalists, even theoretically progressive or liberal journalists who started with so-called both-sidism because of massive transfer of public money to particular journalists, and they wanted to repeat it also with NGOs and with dividing NGOs, which was not so successful. So I think that also like in Slovakia and Hungary, I think cases, it's super important to not go and not follow with this differentiation inside the third sector, that there are better and worse NGOs. We have different strategies, but we are still one civil society.
Yeah, so thanks God this is the past. And what do you feel now with the new government? Is the situation better, way better? How do you rate it? 10 out of 10?
Yeah. Definitely, when it comes to the lack of attacks on NGOs, the situation is much better. But still, we have to admit also that during the resistance against far-right government, we lost some trust, because collaborating sometimes with pro-democratic parties, I openly coordinated some platforms for uniting the opposition, at least on some rule of law issues, agreement on rule of law, for example. And of course, we are paying this price of being sometimes close with pro-democratic parties. So I think it has massive effect on the trust, but still also after a Ukrainian refugee crisis, when NGOs of very different roots connected and worked together and used their networks to work on that, it also proved that even if we are sometimes open for brave and unconventional activities, we still are very stick to our mission, and it works, and it gives the space to have this trust back.
Yeah, this is actually what I was going to ask you next. Like, it is so amazing and admirable how the Polish civil society kept doing also during this 8 years of peace. You organized massive protests. You even helped to achieve this big turnout 2023. So if you would give some recommendations to our colleague how to overcome this pressure, this period, what would you say briefly?
Yeah. 3 short phrases. Firstly, don't divide inside the sector. It's really the most important thing. The second one, and it's just don't be afraid to talk about money, because we are attacked all the time because of funding. I think that we should be open. In order to preserve our independence and our existence, we need, sometimes if it is still legally possible, get international funding. If it is going from European Union or United States, and it's not from the organizations which are against our values, it's nothing but to do it and to use every possible resources, even if we generally want to reduce the influence of business to politics. And third is just sharing experiences in different countries. We know that Polish government sent us our export product, judicial reform to Israel and Netanyahu regime, for example. They are collaborating. Hungarian advisors from Orban are working all the time in Poland. United States people connected with Republicans. So just we need to collaborate and to know what are the next steps in this far-right playbook. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have another question for the panelists, but I wanted to ask if there is an urgent need from the audience to ask question. Now is the time. Do we have? Yeah, I have one hand there. Do we have a microphone? Volunteer with my microphone, please.
I volunteer. This doesn't work. No, this one maybe.
So please keep it brief and maybe also address the question to panelists.
So yeah, my name is Jakub Kocjan. I'm from Forum of Young Diplomats, and the question is regarding the Slovakia case, because the protests that civil society was able to gain and to stand against the Fico government over the years, it was really like showing that people are against it. However, Fico is perfectly polarizing the society, for example, with the recent change of constitution. So is it like any discussion within the civil society how to somehow manage to stop this polarization which is done by Fico, even within the, let's say, liberal or anti-Fico political parties and social groups? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Andrej?
Yes, thank you. It's a very good question. So for those, I left it out, but just for those who don't know, Slovakia recently passed a constitutional amendment which says that the government only recognizes two, as it says, biologically defined genders, and that gay adoption it would be completely outlawed, even though it was not possible even until then, and a few more measures in this spirit. Now that is a subject that indeed divides also civil society, because there is a good number of Christian conservative institutions. and also a challenge for the opposition, which also includes Christian Democrats as well as liberal parties. It's too early to give some big kind of assessment, but my hunch so far is that among civil society there is even a stronger understanding than among opposition parties that we are going to be a pluralist society, that liberals cannot convert conservatives and the other way around, and we have to find a way how to coexist between each other. And so I'm not saying that there has been a huge wave of support of Christian conservative organizations towards LGBT activists or so on, but there is, I think, a general understanding that we are in the same boat, as you said, that if the laws are changed, and even if they are targeted against one particular kind of NGOs or one particular NGO agenda, if the rules get worse for somebody, it's not good news for everyone. Right? So this idea of everybody playing on the same field, everybody needing to respect the same kinds of basic rules and principles is something that is shared between the NGOs, even if there are ideological differences between them.
Thank you very much. So, to close, I would like each of you to answer this question with one sentence, because Freedom Games are followed by thousands of people, so now is your time to make a call for action. So what is the single most important thing we as active citizens or like policymakers there should do to protect civil society in the next period?
Sorry for mentioning money again, but really it's very important for every person who can afford that. Every hour which can be designed to work on strategic planning or organizing demonstrations or just building the capacity further every hour is going either for that, the substance of the work of every NGO, or for fundraising, which takes with every year and every another crisis in the United States, it takes much more time. So just, if it is possible, if you have trust to NGOs, it really changes the dynamic of the organization.
I would say, firstly, of course, keeping focus on those countries and civil societies who are now struggling to survive, but also maintain flexibility when it comes to the European countries, because in case of Georgia, we are really on the edge of survival. So what we need now is a flexible Europe that can really adjust and reframe its thinking and really help countries that are now rapidly moving towards autocracy to help civil societies there to survive.
Thank you. When Jakub was asked to give us an idea on what we should do, I thought he was going to say change the government. But this would be, of course, the best tip, which is very hard to say. And I could say many other tips, but I think maybe one that could be very useful is, as a tip for reinforcing civil societies, read a book and kind of tell other people to read books as well, because the Orban regime is kind of built on or based on the steady influx of stupid people, and if there's less of that resource going around in Hungary, I think they have less to work with. So this is maybe one tip that's very easy to complete. There are many short books, perhaps maybe even a comic book would suffice. This is one tip I can give apart from changing the government.
Thank you. Andrej?
And in addition to what has been said, I would add realistic expectations. There are people who remember the demonstrations in 2018 or even as far back as 1988, 1989, and they read the news, or even they are personally affected by the kinds of changes that we talked about, and they say, I am ready to go and protest every week. However, that is a bubble. They are a minority, and this bubble needs to be able to communicate to the rest of the country, and to understand that it's hard to maintain momentum, that there can be good people who don't feel like going protesting every week, and that is the kind of pressures that the protest organizers and other NGOs need to take into account.
Thank you, Jakub, Nino, Márton, Andrej. Thank you for your attention. Today's lesson learned is that civil society is a luxury, but it's a foundation of freedom, and we have to defend this. So please go and spread the message and enjoy the rest of Freedom Games. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Maybe we could take a picture together. Yeah. Perfectly on time. Thank you for your collaboration. Yeah. I didn't know. I will manage.
2, 3, 4, 15. Dzień dobry, dzień dobry, dzień dobry. Raz, dwa, trzy, to jest... Nie, to jest jedynka, raz, dwa, trzy. To jest dwójka. To jest dwójka.
Na radę coś trzeba przestroić.